Good day.
We're live.
Good day. I don't know.
Test.
How's our setup?
How's that sound? Yeah, that's pretty good.
Got some thumbs up.
All right.
Thanks, Eric. Loving it. Loving that thumbs up.
Hit that thumbs
Are
up
we
when we're
audible?
waiting.
Can you hear
Test,
us?
test, test.
Do we have a bassy vocal response?
All right.
Thanks, y'all, for showing up. We're going to have a short discussion about living alternative lifestyles, van life, off the grid, RV life. Talk a little about we have some questions here from some listeners. We're just kind of work this stuff out in real time in front of you guys. Maybe someday this stuff will make it to an official TMBA podcast episode.
Already has.
We've done some of the things, but we're going to push it in new directions today. We're talking a little bit more lifestyle, a little bit less actually deal cutting when it comes to purchasing recreational vehicles and vans and things like that. First off, just a little rant. Can I be heard here for a second?
Wait, I thought I was Skip Bayless. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm going to be...
You're gonna be Skip Bayless?
No,
right
I'm
now?
going to be the other guy.
All right.
I can't remember. Stephen A.
Stephen A.
Stephen A. is always mad about something. And today I'll tell you what I'm mad about. Why do so many smart people think that up and to the right with the stock market is the same thing as life itself? Here's the problem. There's so many people on the web that advocate for this idea of you take all of your money, whether it's a 401k, whether it's your savings or whatever, and you make it go to work for you. Oh, it's a shame that that money isn't making money for you. And so let's put it into this enormous, recently discovered and invented game, casino, called the stock market. Let's all put it in there. And then when everything goes to shit like it did a few weeks ago, what we say is, well, it's gonna come back. And so there's multiple smart people that I know personally, people that are enormously popular public figures that are basically online right now. And their whole agenda is this whole thing's gonna be back online and it's gonna be better than it ever was 2 or 3 years from now. Of course, even our president is saying this. And here's the thing, they very well might be right. They might even be more than 50% right. But the thing is like what makes me so mad about this is it's intellectually dishonest, is that you are asking people to potentially be ruined. It's coming up on black, guys. Definitely. 50% of the time, all the time, it comes up on black.
Mm-hmm.
And I want everybody else to believe it because my whole agenda depends on this being true. Now, the person saying that shit, they win no matter what. The president gets reelected, the blogger gets attention, they always win. It's everybody else who's depending on smart people to be leaders are the ones that are risking everything for this. And my whole thing is like this. When I read smart people talk like that, it's like, why have a strategy that like depends on you being right? Like, you're gonna be wrong a lot of times. So why not have a strategy that's like, if you're wrong, you're okay too, right? Why put every single penny into the casino when you could put half of your pennies into the casino? Or why not even acknowledge that the half is like a viable strategy? Honestly, this has been a weird emotional time for me, as for everybody. You see all kinds of different egos flare and emotions flare. But for me, it's been just weird and surreal to just see this belief system be challenged. This belief of the casino, of the American stock market, of the American dollar, of like, this is always up and to the right. And sure, maybe we got another 20 years in us. Maybe we got another 50 years in us. But I can't help but thinking this is just such a Roman attitude. This is just such a, this idea that the moment you step outside of America, the first thing you notice is how America isn't the center of everything. And somehow when you're here, it is. And it's weird to me to see so many smart people think that something that's 100 years old will just gonna go for another 100 for sure. And it's just weird belief, and I'm not a big fan.
It's weird. Manny asks you, Dan, are you going to talk more about your zombie portfolio anytime soon?
Yeah.
All right. So this term zombie, we've been throwing it around a little bit. The idea is like is resilient. I think resilient is another word for zombie. So what's your zombie portfolio look like?
Can I talk to you about where the zombie word came from?
Sure.
For a hot second. Have you ever watched the movie 28 Days Later? one of the greatest movies of all time. Okay, so here's why I love zombie movies. I love Stephen King's The Stand. That's a book about a pandemic. But it's never the idea
Poor
of
Stephen King, by the way. It just always falls apart at the end. He's the worst ender ever.
I know, but a great guy,
Yeah.
seemingly a great guy. I'll say this. You know, the idea of the zombie movies, I never was a big fan of like the baseball bats and the chainsaws to the head. That always happens in the final quarter of the movie. Like the climax is like you encounter the zombie horde and then you overcome them somehow. But for me, the best part was always waking up in the morning and walking out and realizing that everything had changed. And and there's this image at the beginning of 28 Days Later, which was a very famous image in movie making, which was how did they shut down the center of London to show this man walking out of a hospital? Like all of a sudden, the whole world has changed.
During COVID? COVID 1?
Well, not a few days ago, that same picture showed up in the
New York Times.
New York Times,
Yeah.
and it was like, holy shit, this is our reality. And now I'm like taking bike rides down in downtown Austin, and there's all these signs above the top of the road, and it's like giving these like COVID-19. In due of COVID-19, keep your distance from other people. Be sure to watch. This is like the beginning opening montage of a Hollywood movie. I mean, it is surreal shit. So of course, we're all acting a little bit weird. The idea of then the zombie portfolio is simply this. What happens when everything changes? What happens when enormous disruptions come down the pike? It is a consequence of black swan type thinking, this idea of fooled by randomness, Nassim Taleb, essentially this. Because people don't want bad things to happen, we plan our lives around consistency and certainty and good things happening. We always underestimate the chances of game changers. And because of that, smart investors will really benefit if they build a portfolio that can benefit from game changers. How do you do that? You make a bunch of small, cheap bets that have enormous upside potential. Small example for me, I take 10% of my total net worth and I put it into Bitcoin. Why? Because I think it's the retail investment opportunity of a generation, because you don't have to put any time into it. And it's been around for 10 years already, and it's very volatile. Investors will say, well, we shouldn't put our hedge funds cash into Bitcoin, or I shouldn't put my personal cash because it's very volatile. Well, I'm saying, well, that's kind of the whole point. Like, you want to invest in a lot of small things like small businesses and Bitcoin and shit like this that is super volatile. If you call me up 10 years from now and you're like, dude, Bitcoin, nobody even remembers what it was, I'd be like, yeah, totally. Or if you said it's like 10x or 100x, I'd be like, yeah, totally. If you call me up 10 years from now and you're like, dude, Bitcoin is like the same. It's like tracking with the US dollar. I'd be like, what? Like, that's the craziest outcome. So
Which is kind of what's been happening recently. So it's a little bit confusing.
It's early days, man. You cannot sit around and watch this shit all day long. That is not zombie.
We're getting some feedback here, man. Pretty sure the Mac mic is being used, not the hand mics. Maybe we didn't set it up right.
That sucks balls.
All right, so if that's the case, does that work? Can you hear that?
Okay. I don't know if we can change that during the live chat, unfortunately. So we should project.
All right, so we're gonna stream into this computer up here. If you guys can hear us, hopefully
we can
hear fine. Oh, nothing from that. Not from that mic. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right.
Let's yell. Yell at the screen.
We can get closer. Can you get a little closer?
We can still hear. Mike is not going to YouTube.
All right. Cool. Sorry about that, guys. That sucks.
All right. So.
So
zombie portfolio.
Zombie portfolio right now is basically small bets in small businesses, heavy cash, and then in terms of big market retail purchases, whether that's real estate index funds, like a mixed bag like of that, that's going to be 50% of your portfolio or less. That's a basic zombie portfolio. But look, I'm not an expert. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing. My personal allocation right now would be 10% Bitcoin, 25 to 30% markety stuff, and then the rest cash, and then business interests.
Mine is business interests, cash, heavy on cash, some in collectibles like vehicles, and then about a quarter in real estate.
Yeah, one of the cool things Ian has that's very zombie that I don't have is, yeah, cash seems like an obvious zombie play, but who knows? Like zombies could eat. That could be the thing that they like to sustain on.
Well, what happens if hyperinflation happens?
Hyperinflation. Right? There's a lot of arguments that suggest that maybe you'd be okay in a hyperinflation situation since we have such a big domestic economy, and we do have. I mean, well, we're saying we're in America right now. Like America has a unique piece of real estate on the planet, but again, that can be upended too. So.
Manny says, nice. That's pretty much what my allocation looks like without the cool name. Just start calling it the Zombie Fund. Dude, I mean, I think it's so
what happens when you get into podcasting.
Take it over.
You got to make something out of nothing. All right, let's talk a little bit about RV life, van life. We've been thinking a lot about this. Basically, I mean, I've been a digital nomad since 2008, and that's 12 years of digital nomading.
Man, I would have thought you would have been more popular on Instagram. Like maybe you're just not taking the right photos.
I have a really hard time like pausing to do, Instagram-y kind of stuff. I saw somebody was driving down the street the other day, and there was this woman like laying in wildflowers, like uncomfortably with a cool hat on, and like two people were taking photos of her, and I just thought, I can't live like that.
Yeah, there's two accounts that you should follow on Instagram if you have time. It's Influencers in the Wild and Neat Dad.
Neat Dad is the best, for sure.
All right, but today we're talking about van life, RV life, and part of the reason for that, I've been interested in this for a while. I did an interview with my buddy Corey, who buys and sells a lot of RVs. And Corey, we called him up the other night because Dan's interested in buying an RV now. And Corey's main idea, which I think is a very good one, is basically it depends on the mission.
Know your mission.
Know your mission.
Know your mission. I love this. That's why Corey is such a fun hang is, in everyday conversation, he'll drop a line like that. Well, Dan, it depends on your mission. And I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, it does depend on what is my mission? So I outlined my mission. And one of the things that comes from this like digital nomad thing of like, traveler's going to travel, right? Like if I can't get on an airplane in the medium term, all of a sudden we're all bound in one place. Maybe domestic travel options are heating up. And so it's been fun to explore, what it might look like, especially with the social distancing and uncertainty and domestic travel. Well, now all of a sudden we're looking at cars that you can live in, vans, RVs, that you can still have a fun, exploring style lifestyle and mobility, given like the hopefully short-term circumstances here with international travel.
And I'm just going through these comments. It's cool that you guys are already popping them in there. Alan Walton, good to see you, buddy. He says, we see boho camper vans on Shark Tank last week. Look cool, but I don't know anything about them. So that's a good thing. I'm pulled up boho right now. I'm going to critique them a little bit because I've been looking at these things so long that I kind of know, like, okay, if this is the mission, this would be a van for you. Let me just preface this with this. There are a lot of people that are into this lifestyle, but are not living this lifestyle. So I just want to highlight that. And for an example, hashtag Vanlife. This account is pretty good, but what they do is they show.
It's a hashtag.
Yeah, hashtag Vanlife. But there are like Vanlife accounts on Instagram. I don't know what they are, but very popular. Like hundreds of thousands of followers. What they do is they glamorize this life. Okay, and what they do is they take a picture of an attractive girl in the van, and this is like the first image, and this is why you click on it. She's living in a van, seemingly alone. Like this is the beginning of like some porn video or something. It's outrageous what they do. And then you scroll to the next photo, and then it's like just the van, and then you scroll after that, and it's her and her husband and her dog. Of course, this is what's going on. And most of the time,
and like eight cubic feet.
Yeah, and 8 cubic feet. Most of the
time,
and
no bathroom.
They're living in a van that is too small.
It is down by the river.
It is down by the river. And that's what these boho camper vans look like. Alan, this is a E350 van. It's not a pop top, so you can't stand up in it. That's super annoying.
So an E350 van, for those of you thinking, it's like a painter's van. It's like those white, creepy vans that, and they're super popular in the van life community, but not as popular as the Sprinter van platforms, which are the taller, more European-looking ones.
I just want to say this about these camper vans, because I'm looking through here right now. It's got solar panels on the roof. Wow. It's made with sustainable wood. This is a van that you can go to the park with for a day and enjoy yourself and maybe sleep in it. But and the reason I bring this up is because I think people are getting enticed by the imagery. They're getting enticed by the idea, and then they're not really considering, is this a machine that I can actually live in for a long time, for weeks at a time? And I think back to Corey's point, which is it really matters what your mission is. It really matters what you're trying to do. If you're trying to live in a van full time, drive across America for a year, you don't want an E350 van like this, these boho campers, because you're going to be uncomfortable. It's not a great way to live.
Yeah, there's like 3 categories. I was watching a YouTube video a few weeks ago, and an RV sales guy said there's a rest category, there's a retreat category, and there's a residence category.
Yeah.
And everybody has to define it for themselves. The reality is that there are a lot of, if you know your mission, there are a lot of people that are more comfortable in a van than in a big 30-foot Class C RV where you're driving a big truck down the road. An example of that would be like a very serious mountain climber. So if you watch Alex Honnold, he kind of was one of those first like famous people you saw on TV, kind of like doing van life that I saw rather. And it was so cool because he got to drive his van like right up to the mountain, and he would like cook his oatmeal and he would just roll out and like climb all day long. And I thought, this guy, that's so cool that he's so passionate about that and stuff like that.
Something important about that guy though, if you notice, like his life is only about climbing. Like, and the way he eats is only about climbing. He has like a pull-up bar on like the entrance to his van. And I think most people, they'd like to live as simply as he does, you know, with like that one forward straight mission, but most people don't. Like most people have a life. They have a family. You know,
well,
like
and having looked at a lot of people living the van life specifically, because I'm single, Ian's got a family. I'm right in between, negotiating with a lot of people, talking with a lot of potential sellers right now between like a B+ and a C. And you're in a, we'll get to this, but he's in a solid like toy hauler. How long is your unit?
I think it's like 26 feet.
26 feet, and a family can live in 26 feet. So a lot of people, when you look at straight van life, these are people that are on relatively short-term focused missions.
Correct.
Whether that's, you see a ton of like mountain bike couples, and they're basically like, we're going to spend 6 months to 12 months and we're going to like hit every trailhead that's ridiculous. You just wouldn't want a 30-foot Class C if that's your mission. And I think it all comes back to Corey, the deal master, which is, really clearly clarifying your mission. And it seems to me like as that mission changes, so do these rigs quite a bit.
Totally. Noah Kagan in the house. What's up, buddy?
What's up, buddy?
Taylor Banks has been living in his RV for years now, 6.5 years.
Hell yeah.
We've been traveling from Key West to virtually everywhere in between. I don't even know where that place is. The Kenai Peninsula? Cool. Now that our dogs have moved on, we're considering downsizing. They used to live in a 30-footer. So, Dan, what kind of van are you considering? Because we went on an RV trip 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And we went out to Marfa and we went out to Big Bend. And you basically outfitted your Honda Odyssey.
Yeah, for $500, I turned my Honda Odyssey into a van lifeable van. And there's this great channel called Cheap RV Living.
Yeah.
What a cool channel. If you want to feel like internet good vibes, this guy's just all about people achieving freedom for less money. And one way you can do that domestically. One of the things that's been really interesting to me is like basically being grounded. Over the past 12 years, I've spent the vast majority of my time outside of the United States. This is the first time I've really been grounded domestic, And it's interesting to compare digital nomads with van lifers. They have so much in common, but it's same, but different sort of thing. And so I've really loved that vibe of the digital nomad, like $1,000 in a backpack. It's only cost me $1,000 a month to like buy my freedom back. And you do the same math with rents and mortgages relative to the RVs. When you're thinking like domestic, and it's not just domestic, right? I mean, a lot of people drive their RVs the whole way down the Americas. So I think that's interesting. Specific to me, there's been this big explosion in excitement around Class B RVs because of the Sprinter platform.
Let's talk about the classes real quick here. This is just, it's silly the way that they do this, but this is the way it is. Class A is the big one. That's like a bus, okay? So if you see something that's shaped like a bus, but it's an RV, that's a Class A.
Correct.
All right. Class B is a van, essentially.
It's a van.
So this van life, hashtag van life, that's considered a class B. A class C is, generally speaking, the front half is a van, so it's on a truck chassis or a van chassis, and then they build it out. So a lot of times it looks like an ambulance. Okay,
Yeah, they
it's
put
got
like a box on the back.
exactly. It's got the van or the truck front end, and then it's got a box on the back end. And sometimes those boxes get to be as big as a class A.
Right.
But just so when we're talking about this, class A is the biggest. Class B is actually the smallest, and then Class C is in between.
Well, what's interesting when for a lot of us, Class A's are like a whole nother ball game for a lot of people. But a lot of people in the middle of their life, they're looking for B's and C's. It feels like there is an age correlation just a little bit. You think that's fair?
Well, Class A's, I mean, the deal with Class A's is you are going to be limited in terms of where you can go. But a Class A has a washer dryer in it a lot of times. I mean, it's like it's a rolling house basically. So
Yeah.
a lot of older people do it because a lot of times they're just going from point A to point B. They're not going to a trailhead to ride mountain bikes,
Yeah.
or they're going to their favorite campgrounds that they know they can fit through. But definitely you have to do some advanced planning if you have a Class A, because there's certain places you can't get to.
Well, an
That's-
enormous discussion here is basically how much of your time do you have to spend in campgrounds? Because if you go on a deep dive tonight on van life, there's a huge correlation. Van life people don't want to go to campgrounds. They don't want to sit around the fire with, there are now places like in BLM land, at Planet Fitnesses. There's a whole nother trail where like young van life people go. And I think the social community is a big aspect to it. And when you go to like a lot of typical RV parks, you're packed in like sardines. There's lots of rules. There's lots of kids running around. There's lots of retired people. It's like not really the scene it's not this exciting scene. You want to be at the trailhead with like people who converted their own vans and that don't pay for right. That's where
you want to be.
There's social differences.
That's where you want to be.
That's my point. Yes, you want to be hanging out in the city. You don't want to be like, oh, did you call ahead to so-and-so's RV fun park or whatever? We're going to have to stay there tonight. So to answer your question, the RV companies are seeing this interest. And now they're starting to address it by doing a lot of Class B conversions. And there's this category called Class B plus.
By the way, Taylor chimes in here, and I think this is important because this is a point I've been arguing with you on for a long time now.
Yeah.
It says we don't spend much time in campgrounds in our Class A either, but we've been at this long enough to know where and how to find beautiful off-the-grid spots.
Absolutely.
So there is a demographic that enjoys that.
I'm not arguing that point.
My old man,
I'm
old
not arguing
friend,
that point.
for him, it is an amazing situation to be able to roll into one of these RV parks and instantly have 50 friends.
Exactly.
Like, for some people, that's great. We have our community online, and so most of the time, that's not what we're looking for. But I think Taylor's point is true too, which is like you can make a Class A work no matter what you want to do, but you got to find workaround.
Sure. And honestly, for those of you who've been digital nomading and like booking tickets and booking hotels and shit, it's probably a lot easier to figure out a place to park your Class A than it is to figure out where you're going to stay in Singapore in the next few weeks.
Totally.
So, cool. So basically there's this category of vans, guys, that I'm really interested in called Class B plus, because when you allow a third party sort of rear living space, like a brand like Coachman or whatever, to build out that box in the ambulance, it's a lot cheaper than if those same carpenters have to go inside of like a Mercedes Sprinter and build it out from the inside out. In other words, they can mass produce these sorts of things in their own factories and then just pop them on a Ford or Mercedes or Dodge chassis. And there's this kind of like, there's this idea of like, I'm curious to see what you guys think about this, but around like anything less than 24 foot is sort of somehow seemingly can get into a parking space, in like a normal place. And I think once you go to like the 30 foot, you're sort of like this special needs vehicle whenever you go to like a Chipotle or whatever it is you're doing. And so I think for me, being single, looking for interesting spots, I'm looking for something that's less than 24 feet, basically.
All right, but you started out looking at a Sprinter van. Why did you change your mind? So again, Sprinter van is like the Amazon in America, the Amazon delivery trucks, or in Europe, they've been using Sprinter vans forever. It's these elongated vans with high tops in them, and then they build them out. Perfect for one person. But you kind of started there, and you were like squarely, I'm like a Sprinter guy. This is what I want. And then you changed. Why did you change?
Well, I mean, a lot of it's price. It's like, it's interesting. One of the things that's really so fascinating about this lifestyle is, you know, it reminds me of cycling a little bit, where everything is so detail oriented. If your legs go around 10,000 times, it really matters like how your shoes feel, or like whether your stem is like 1 centimeter long or short. And it's the same thing with a lot of these rigs. It's like, well, if your fridge is like that much higher, then you're getting this kind of trade off. And one of the big trade offs is honestly price. I mean, for a comparable sprinter platform versus a B plus platform, you could be looking at 20 or 30 or even $40,000 difference for what is amounts to a slightly more maneuverable rig that looks cooler.
Well, I think part of it was you went from your one of your main focuses before was like parking and stealthiness. So
Yeah.
like that again, like knowing your mission. In the beginning, I think you thought your mission would be like, how do I park and how am I stealth? And the idea in my head around that was like, if you're in New York City, but the truth is you're in New York City 0.5% of the time.
Yeah.
So what were you thinking when you I mean, price was one thing, but tell me about this like stealth idea, because again, Dan, I think that you were, I don't want to say you were seduced, but you were definitely heading towards where the Instagram van life
I'm still totally into that if I can get a deal on one. So, I mean,
Okay.
I think like it's very, very marginal. I mean, like for me, storage is like an enormous concern. Multiple bikes and golf clubs, like that is, and the reality is like a lot of Class C's don't have a ton of room for that, depending on their size. A lot of B pluses don't. With the Class C, you could imagine using like the overhead space for this stuff. So you got to kind of like retrofit everything, and I think that's the fun. Like I could see myself on a lot of different rigs and like making personal modifications and things like that. So I'm wide open. Just you can get a lot more bang for your buck if you go Class C.
You can, and part of the reason again is because they're on truck chassis. So these manufacturers, they buy the chassis from Ford or from Chevrolet at a deep discount because it's just bare bones, and then they plop on their habitat on the back. And a lot of times with these Sprinter vans, that Sprinter market hasn't been around that long. And so like finding tanks that fit into the Sprinter water tanks and finding different sinks and toilets and showers and all this stuff, not only does it have to be compact, but it has to be relatively inexpensive. And so that efficiency, it doesn't feel like that's there for that supply chain yet. Whereas for the RV world, when you can go to RV stores and buy toilets,
well, that's the problem. So I'm looking at the reason I'd love to be in a Sprinter. The problem is like, am I going to spend 6 months of my life building the thing full time? Am I going to buy one for $100,000? Am I going to buy an old one that has 250,000 miles on it for 50 grand? Or am I going to put a bunch of shitty stuff in the back of it for a couple grand and like live in a van? So then all of a sudden you look at the Class C options, and no one's really figured out this problem of how to like affordably build out Sprinter vans. If there's a couple, like it's actually not a bad business idea. I mean, there's a couple, what would you say, like modular kit companies doing this, but they're pretty basic and not that appealing to me. But if you could like start a company, because I think a lot of people are going to go zombie van direction in the next few months. It's like, and it's already been an enormous trend, which is like people basically seeing the bullshit in the whole like home ownership mortgage, ecosphere of like, get this 30-year note and this is like the best investment of your life. And by the way, everybody's doing it. And I think a lot of the RV world, they got this like wokeness to that. Like that's not going to be our lives really. And I think you can really justify getting into these things. So, well, you go out and buy, this is economics. If you can go out and buy a $30,000 Sprinter van, and then there's a kit company where you can buy a kit that's anywhere from $8,000, even on the low end, like a $500 kit, which is like a couple cots and a thing, up to a $20,000 kit. That's a cool business idea. And there's only a few people doing it that way. Most of the people, it's like, Dan's Vans, like bring your van down, and then like 120 days, it'll roll off the line. It'll be $140,000. You'll have a cool kit. High-end market, that's cool, but it's not like a product way of doing it. It's a service way of doing it.
Yeah. I'll say this too about these, the difference between some of these RVs. For me, one of the big differences is how long you can be off the grid. These solar panels that they're putting on these vans, they're pretty cool. It makes it so you can be off the grid for longer. But there's one thing that a solar panel can't do, and that's generate water. Still haven't figured out how to generate water. And the problem with a lot of these smaller vans, especially the Sprinter vans, is that they only have 20 or 30 gallon capacity for your fresh water, and usually a little bit, 2/3 of that for your dump water, which is basically your gray water. So makes it hard to be off the grid unless you're willing to bathe in a stream. I think part of the appeal of these larger rigs is that you can be off the grid for much longer. So again, it's like know your mission. If you are being enticed by this van life, I think that's cool. It's going to work for a lot of people. A lot of, especially single people, are going to be able to do it, take military showers, and have the time of your life. But just consider the constraints of some of these smaller vehicles. And one of the ways that you can do that is you can go to rvshares.com. rvshares.com is pretty cool. I've even thought about like buying a bunch of RVs and putting them on here because these guys are making a mint. I mean, they're buying these RVs for $10,000 and then putting them up for $300 a night. So the idea behind RV Shares is that you can go and rent a bunch of these different rigs and test them out and try them out and figure out what works for you and your family.
Cool. So let's take some questions. Let's wrap it up. I think that's a good enough intro conversation. We could, of course, talk about this for a great deal of time, but
I want to talk about one other thing, Dan. I watched a movie last night. It's called Life Off the Grid. And, let's try and tie this all together. But somehow this is all related to me, like the digital nomad life, entrepreneurship, RV life. And then I watched this film called Life Off the Grid.
dude, because it's punk rock.
It's punk rock.
F the man. That's what it's about.
This is here's the from IMDb. Off the grid is not a state of mind. It's not about being out of touch, living in a remote place, or turning off your mobile phone. Off the grid simply means living without a connection to the world. And world meaning electric and natural gas infrastructure. So of course there's a bit of an agenda in this film, right? But I think when I was watching this, what I found interesting was the way that people were talking about their lives. And these people are entrepreneurs in a lot of ways. They're very resourceful people. They have figured out a way to live in the bush, what they call it in Canada, with limited resources. And most of them have built their own houses. They've built their own power supplies. They know how to farm. And I think like going through a time like this, Dan, it's you look at those people and you think like, wow, those people are pretty protected from a bad event because they have this infrastructure and they're self-sustainable. And I think the same can be true for our businesses and our lives now too, which is like, we're going through this issue, we're going through this pandemic. How are we going to protect ourselves even better for the next time? I think van life is one of the ways that you can do that. Even if you just use your van as like an escape vehicle, if you got an extra $20,000-$30,000 and you got a place to park this thing, like, it's a pretty interesting option.
On the one hand, it's like, is that really any insurance? But on the other hand, I'm thinking I have a lot of friends right now who would really wish they would have had a vehicle like that at this moment. So, yeah, I think that's totally fair. Of course, it's hard to predict these things, but
it's totally hard to predict these things. But you can get yourself into one of these vans for very cheap, and if you have a place to park it, I think it's interesting. One of the things that Corey talked about on the episode that we did was having 3 or 4 of these things and parking them all across the country, because it's very easy to find places to park these things. Like there's all these RV storage lots and whatnot. Yeah. You can park it for like $100 a month. Seems like a lot, right? $1,200 a year. But if you can invest $10,000 in a decent rig, which you can, park it in Utah or somewhere where you like to go during the summer, right? So it's like all in, I'm in $1,000 a year for rent, basically, and I'm there for 2 months, and I've got this RV up there. I think that's an interesting way to live, is to bounce between these two guys.
Well, we'll definitely be doing some of these live streams from our RV in the next coming months. That's the part of the plan. Jace in the Dynamite Circle forum asked a few questions. He'd be keen to hear your thoughts on living, and we'll answer a few questions, and then we'll get out of here. So if you got some questions, we appreciate you guys coming and hanging out. Hope this is making your quarantine a little bit more fun. We're willing to talk about anything, by the way, if you haven't already noticed. Jace asked some questions. He said, what are your thoughts about living in something full-time versus a few months a year? And by the way, I wish we could like buzz you guys in, because I bet there's some wonderful thoughts here in the audience. But what are your thoughts about living part-time versus full-time in an RV? I
think it depends if you have a house. It's a good question. I I would be interested in know. I think most people, what they do from just watching YouTube and whatnot, is they sell their house and then they go live in an RV full time. It's like a thing that they do.
It reminds me of the digital nomad choice, which is that mobility is such an expensive choice for a lot of people that it's an either or proposition. You're either in the mobility or you're in the homestead. And the real baller outcome is that you wouldn't have to ever make that choice because you have a homestead and you have the mobility option.
I think if most people that are doing this would choose, it would be that, to have a home base and then also have an RV. I mean, it's no matter how big your RV is, it's hard to feel like it has enough space. I mean, I think maybe if you're used to living in a New York studio apartment, which I'm not, you might be able to transition just fine to that. But for me, I have my limits, a couple of weeks and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to like go back to my house. And then a week later or 2 weeks later, I'm ready to leave again.
Yeah. Well, what a lot of people in the RV community do is they got a double wide sitting somewhere and that's home. So
yeah, and that's totally possible too.
And especially if you're into the scene, that's like a scenester kind of way to do things. So one of the things Jace says too is he's been looking at a XCap Straighter 12M18. If you don't know what one of these things are, which I didn't before I clicked this link.
Spell that for me so I can pull it up.
It's a EXCAP STEYR 12M18. So this is almost like a military grade looking video. These are the kind of vehicles that you see celebrities ordering on television shows. Pretty awesome. I know Jace is a very serious mountain biker and goes to some serious terrain.
So if you look at these things, that's what it is. It's basically a 4x4 chassis, 4x4 probably diesel, very heavy duty, and then they're putting these boxes on the back of it. Jace, you're a wild man, first of all. So a couple things about these units. They're like $250,000 and up, and I've seen them for like $1 million or $2 million. It's one of these like vehicles that I question how many people actually use it for its intended purpose versus like
ballin'.
Dan, whatever his name is, Dan Brazilian or whatever.
Yeah, like it's looking cool. They look cool.
This is a looking cool vehicle. It's very unique. You'll probably, I've never seen one on the road because they are so expensive.
The real question is, what's the point? I mean, Jace's got a family, so the way I've seen people solve these extreme problems is like you get a Class C that has towing capacity. And then if what you want to do is get to a trailhead, you either put like a Jeep behind it, you put an ATV, like some kind of vehicle that will allow you to get to an extreme place.
Yeah. And one of the things that
you don't want to take your like bathroom to the extreme place. You can just go, your whole family probably doesn't want to go there too,
There's a company, it's called Quigley, and they make conversions for, they make 4x4 conversions. Actually, Corey is working on one of these. So he got a van truck chassis, did a Quigley conversion, 4x4 conversion, and then he's building on the back of it his living space, which is essentially the problem that this solves. And a guy like Corey and sometimes me wants to get to a place that's extremely remote, and so you got to figure out a way to get there. And Sprinter, they've tried to address this with the all-wheel drive system that they have, but it's not very robust. So if you truly want an off-road vehicle that's also an RV, it's kind of a difficult market to serve, and that's what this MOG I think is trying to adjust for.
One of the things Corey mentioned to me, Jace, if you see this episode, is check out the Sportsmobile E350 conversion. That is a much more robust platform with like big tires, and this is like could do some basic rock climbing. What do you call that? Rock climbing. Rock crawling, basic rock. But anyway, just a big heavy duty rig, and that's got a robust 4-wheel drive system and a big engine in it and stuff. So maybe that would be but still, I mean, when Corey mentioned those units to me, I went to Sportsmobile's website. It's their sort of flagship unit. It's freaking beautiful. It's so hot. I mean, it feels like you should carry a sidearm when you hang out in this thing. And I just thought, a bit tight. Like it's not a real living space. That to me feels like a weekend thing, like a weekend adventure. It's going to be exhausting. We're going to go do this big thing, and then we're going to go back home. Like not really a place where you just want to chill out. Like anyway,
I'll say this because we haven't really talked about it. yet, and I pull a trailer because I like to have my truck for other purposes. And one of the benefits of pulling a trailer is that you can disconnect immediately from your home. So like when you get somewhere, you dump your home and then you're off to the grocery store, and then you have a vehicle that basically you can move around town, and I can like go to the trailhead, throw mountain bikes in there, dirt bikes, whatever it is. So that there's a couple of really big advantages to having a trailer. Now, one of the disadvantages that I've always thought is like the party doesn't start until you park. The party in an RV starts as soon as you start driving down the road, right?
Right.
So you're like swiveling your chair back, you're talking to people in the back. Literally pull over on the side of the road, use the bathroom, make a grilled cheese sandwich, and then like start driving again. You never have to get out of your vehicle. So it's much more self-contained. And again, it just like depends on what your mission is. The other option is that you can flat tow a vehicle behind your RV. A lot of times, if you get in one of these Class C's that has a real truck motor in it, a V8 most of the time, you can flat tow something like a Jeep behind it. So you just pull your Jeep, and when I say flat tow, it means that all four wheels are on the ground. So it's not like pulling a trailer. It's much easier most instances, except you can't really back up, which is a problem. But once you get there, you unhook your Jeep, and then you can drive around and explore wherever you want to go. So those are some of the advantages, I think, of having a trailer and also flat towing. But again, like the Sprinter kind of addresses that, which is you have all of it, right? So you can swivel around, make a grilled cheese sandwich. You can also drive it to the trailhead or park it in the Walmart. The downsides are space, obviously.
Definitely.
Any
other comments or questions?
Comments here. Manny, we will grab a beer at Jester King as soon as this is all over.
For sure. We even ride our little mini bikes over there to get a beer on. How about that? That's fun.
He asked the question, Land Cruiser or 4Runner? We're talking about 4x4 vehicles now. This is a question for the ages. I think it's really personal preference. Both of them are highly supported in the aftermarket. Where do I buy a DC hat? Yes, Tim, we need to get those out. We were supposed to get them out at DC Austin this year, but
the Leather Patch Company. Check out the Leather Patch Company. Maybe we should figure that out. We were talking about bringing a bunch of extra units. In fact, the thing I was most excited about DC Austin was getting like a lifetime supply of this hat, which is amazing. Something we should sort out.
Talking about Overland Expo West, I actually don't know what that is, but I can guess from the name of it. And I want to mention this too, and I've done this before. Dan, I think you've done this before. At most convention centers, once a year, the RV show rolls through. And what that is all these manufacturers bring all their new models to the convention center, and basically you get to crawl in and out of 100 different RVs in a day, and it's awesome because you get to see all these configurations and materials and all the cool things that these manufacturers are doing. The other way to do that, and this is difficult times, obviously, but the other way to do that is in most cities they have consignment lots for RVs. The one in Austin is called PPL, and I actually think that's a national chain. Basically what it is if you're selling an RV, a lot of people don't want to deal with the hassle, so they bring it down to PPL and they put it on a consignment lot, and PPL sells the unit for you. What that means for you, the consumer, is that you also get to crawl through like 50 different units in one day.
Right.
So they leave them unlocked. And I think that's really essential if you're going to get into this, like to go see a bunch of these different rigs, figure out what you like. You might not have to drive it. I mean, just go into it, figure out if the layout's going to work for you. Dan, the layout for you is like super important because you want to have your bike, you want to have your golf clubs. You don't really need two beds. So it's
bikes.
Bikes. So the layout's really important. And it's hard to get a feel for this stuff online. I mean, you kind of look at the configurer,
Yeah.
But for you, tall guy, you get in there, you bang your head. You're like, well, this isn't going to work. I didn't know that online.
Totally. Cool.
Overland Expo is fewer RV manufacturers, more self-builds. All outdoors. Everyone brings their rigs and camps. That sounds like a fun time.
I've heard about this from the person we were camping next to, who had an amazing Sprinter based on a ProMaster platform. And he was telling me, shout out to RV Outlaws, he was telling me to go to this particular hang. He told me you'd learn a lot.
Yeah, Taylor, Taylor Banks is like deep into this.
We got to get Taylor Banks. Who's Taylor Banks? We got to call
Taylor
this
Banks
guy.
has been living in an RV for 6.5 years. He brings up another segment. Real quick, we'll do this and then we'll get off. Tent toppers and truck toppers, basically. So the truck toppers are awesome, but you don't see that many of them around anymore.
Yeah.
They're huge for what they are. And basically what it is you get a full size truck with a decent motor in it, hopefully like a turbo diesel or something like that. And you put this box on the back of your truck. And basically it's the living quarters. It's got a bunch of fresh water in it. It's got a toilet. It's got a shower. It's awesome because then you can drive your truck around.
Right.
I'm having a hard time figuring out actually, Dan, why these aren't.
It's like the cost option, right? If you want to get in, it's
Totally.
like the bang for your buck option.
Like $6,000, you can get a really nice Lance is like the leading manufacturer of these. You can get a really nice used Lance.
Yeah.
Put some airbags on the back of your truck, plop it in there, and just drive away immediately. And I don't know why these things fell out of favor. This was like the original idea. It was like you had RVs and then you had truck toppers, and somehow truck toppers have just disappeared. I don't know why.
You know, they suffer a little bit of the branding issue as the creepy van. You know, it's like it's got a branding issue. Put it that way.
Yeah. And then the last thing he brings up is the pop-ups and the tent toppers. So tent toppers are. This is like a seduction product. It's like these tents that go on the top of your Forerunner, you know, so you don't get bugs on your feet or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I don't know about all that. But then there's these pop-ups. Pop-ups used to be really popular. And the reason was, I think, is because you could tow it with basically anything. These things weigh like 2,000 pounds. So you see it, and it's like this little flat trailer. It's like a cassette, and then it pops up, and then all these screens come out.
Yeah.
Pop-ups are relatively cool. I think the issue with pop-ups is that they're not well insulated. So basically, the part that comes up and expands, a lot of times, like that's mesh and screen and plastic.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to insulate that. So pop-ups for me are really like a 1 or 2 season kind of vehicle, whereas an RV is insulated. You're basically protected from the elements. But the cool thing about pop-ups, again, is that you can pull it with basically anything. You can pull it with your minivan, and they're dirt cheap. Like you can find a nice one for like $2,000.
Right. And I think that there's kind of like the serious crowd, like the 4-season crowd, the van, like these people are like living in their units for large portions of the year. That's like the RV life. The cassette crowd, these are like weekend warriors. Like they're part of a different social sect, you know, like going down to, it's camping, right? It's like twice or thrice a year I go camping. Whereas like, you know, a lot of these
know your mission, right?
Know your mission. Exactly.
Taylor says, if you use StreamYard or Be Live, you can go live on YouTube and bring in live guests. All right. We're going to look into that. Thanks so much, guys.